wish we had more coffee. We don't.
The journey of 1,320 pages begins on page 1. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with just one step. How many books have you read that are 1,000 pages long? This is the Tale of Genji, written by a woman in, I don't know if it's 7th century Japan. Anyways, Karit Subo, the lady of the Polonia courtyard chambers. It's hard to read it this way. It's small print.
What was the time, year, the 1001 Nights were written?
The poem,
Is it the same time?
Says this, the poem recounts the infatuation of the Emperor Xuanzong 685. What's your question?
1001 Nights was written at the same time.
1001 Nights. That's a totally different book. When's it written?
Yeah, if they both are written at the same time.
That's another book we can read is 1001 Nights. It'll take maybe 1001 Nights. But what are the extremely long books we can read? We could watch the movie Alexander Platz. It takes 12 hours. Yeah, I saw what was it,
I guess the longest book would be Our Lives.
I saw Dr. Zhivago in the Russian version.
You did one.
I saw it. It's like kind of long. Longer than American. But anyways, he says, in whose reign was it that a woman of rather undistinguished lineage captured the heart of the emperor and enjoyed his favor above all the other imperial wives and concubines? That's the opening sentence. Well, I guess
it sounds like
it gets down to why does one woman capture the heart of the emperor above all the other women? Certain consorts whose high noble status gave them a sense of vain entitlement despised and reviled her as an unworthy upstart from the very moment she began her service. It's not the author, is it? They were jealous of her. The ladies of lower rank were even more vexed, for they knew His Majesty would never bestow the same degree of affection and attention on them. As a result, the mere presence of this woman at morning rites or evening ceremonies seemed to provoke hostile reactions among her rivals, and the anxiety she suffered as a consequence of these ever-increasing displays of jealousy was such a heavy burden that gradually her health began to fail. His Majesty could see how forlorn she was and how often she returned to her family home. He felt sorry. Felt sorry for her and wanted to help, and though he could scarcely afford to ignore the admonitions of his advisors, his behavior eventually became the subject of palace gossip. Ranking courtiers and attendants found it difficult to stand by and observe the troubling situation, which they viewed as deplorable. They were fully aware that a similarly ill-fated romance had thrown the Chinese state into chaos, and concern and consternation gradually swept through the court. Since it appeared that nothing could be done, many considered the relationship scandalous. Sounds like Jane Austen to me. Many considered the relationship scandalous, so much so that some openly referred to the example of the prize consort Yang. The only thing that made it possible for a woman to continue to serve was the emperor's gracious devotion. The woman's father had risen to the 3rd rank as a major counselor before he died. Her mother, the principal wife of her father, was a woman of old-fashioned upbringing and a character who was well trained in the customs and rituals of the court. So the author's probably mother was well trained in the rituals of the court. How do you think she learned everything to write this book? Thus, the reputation of her house was considered in no way inferior and did not suffer by comparison with the brilliance of the highest nobility. Unfortunately. Her family had no patrons who could provide political support, and after her father's death there was no one she could rely on. In the end, she found herself at the mercy of events and with uncertain prospects. Was she not then bound to the emperor by some deep love for a previous life? For in spite of her travails, they were Buddhist and think things happen from a prior life, karma. For in spite of her travails, she eventually bore him a son in pure radiant gems like nothing of this world. Following the child's birth, His Majesty had to wait impatiently, wondering when he would finally be allowed to see the boy. As soon as it could be ritually sanctioned, he had the infant brought home from mother's when birth had taken place. I bet you that's Genji. So this woman who the emperor liked had a baby. In the instance he gazed upon the child's countenance, he recognized a rare beauty. So now they're into the beauty of a men, you see. And here it's probably Genji. Genji is beautiful. So now we have beautiful men in Japan, old Japan. Now, as it so happened, the crown prince had been born 3 years earlier to the Kokaden consort, who was the daughter of the minister of the right, as the unquestioned heir to the throne. So the boy had many supporters, and the courtiers all treated him with the utmost respect and deference. He was, however, no match for the radiant beauty of the new prince, and even though the emperor was bound to acknowledge the higher status of his older son and to favor him in public and private, he could not resist treating the younger prince as his favorite, lavishing attention upon him. So
was his own also? Were they both his?
So the emperor has an older son and a younger son, and the younger son is probably Genji, and he's very handsome. So.
Oh, I think on television they had some of the tales.
The Tale of Genji.
Mm-hmm.
It seems a long tale.
How every woman would fall in love with.
This is like
that.
They follow the family like over many generations. So the book continues after Genji's even dead.
Mm-hmm.
They like the son and the daughter, and they keep going. It's like I don't know. The book never ends. That's why we're on page 2 of 1,320 pages.
How far is the introduction? Are you planning to read all of it?
Well, we've crawled up many mountains one step at a time. The mother of the newborn prince did not come from a family of the highest rank, but rather was she of such low status that she should have been constantly by the emperor's side like a common servant. Certainly her reputation was flawless, and she comported herself with noble dignity, but because His Majesty obsessively kept her near him, willfully demanding that they not be separated, she had to be in attendance of all formal court performances or elegant entertainments. there were times when she would spend the night with him and then be obliged to continue in service the following day. Consequently, as one might expect, other courtiers came to look down on her, not only as a person of no significance, but also as a woman who lacked any sense of propriety. Moreover, because the emperor treated her with special regard following the birth of his second son, Kokiden consort, her supporters grew anxious. They worried about the effect of such an infatuation on the prospects of the crown prince and wondered if the younger prince might not surpass his half-brother in favor and usurp his position. The Kokiden consort had been the emperor's first wife, and she had arrived at the palace before all the other women, so His Majesty's feelings of affection for her were in no way ordinary. He considered her protest troubling, but he also had to acknowledge that she was deserving of sympathy, since she had given him 2 imperial princesses in addition to the crown prince, who, even though the mother of the newborn prince, relied on the emperor's benevolence for protection. Many of the ladies at court scorned her, and she grew physically weak, and because she felt powerless and had no one to turn to for help, she suffered greatly because of his love. Her chambers at the palace were in the Karitsubo. What's the name of the chapter? Karitsubo, page 5. We're reading from the Tale of Genji. Her chambers at the palace were in Karitsubo, named for its courtyard, which was graced with paulownia trees, because the Karitsubo was in the northeast corner of the palace, thus separated from the emperor's quarters in Suroten. He would have to pass by the chambers of many of the court ladies on his frequent visits to her. Their resentments of these displays were not at all unreasonable, and so it was decided that the woman herself would have to go more often to Sorenden. So it looks like a lot of jealousy and intrigue. And there we go. So this is how Genji got started, I guess.
It's not enough for you to read to me only.
What?
It's not enough for you to read to me only.
To you only? Well, I'm only reading the first part. That's enough for the beginning. I think we can imagine the rest of the troubles.
Yeah, we can imagine the rest of the book.
They're all going to fight now. The prince and the princess, and he's going to have an affair with all the other women around, and he's going to grow up. All the ladies are going to fight with each other, and that's the whole story. We're reading from the Tale of Genji. And apparently the book is full of nice poetry and stuff, and this woman actually wrote poetry. There may be like little poems throughout. That's why we find it kind of interesting. What if you skip and read the poems? So, in this time, if you wanted to have a lover, you had to write them a poem. Otherwise, you lacked tact and were not cool and just had bad taste.